Sales Proformance Show.
Welcome back to the Sales Proformance Show, everybody. I'm your host, Dave Sliman, and we are super excited today. As you know, this show has transformed a lot. It started with sales and business development, and then obviously with people who are successful. We're always going to be talking about personal development. And really, it's evolved into the experts in the space. And our guest today is the founder of Local SEO Guide. He started this in 2006. He was the GM of NBC.com and a founding member of Insider Pages. It really was an early Yelp competitor known for its groundbreaking SEO, but then was acquired by City Search. And then when it was acquired, he started Local SEO Guide. And over the past 17 years, this company has grown from a solo consultant focused on SEO. Now, SEO is a big topic these days, big topic for local marketing and really local businesses. And now he's got a team of 20 with experts in SEO and virtually any type of site that you have. So I'm really excited to have our guests on today because it's a huge topic and you're going to learn a lot. Whether you're a small business in the space, a medium-sized business, or a large organization that has either been involved with it or dipped your toe in SEO, we're going to unpack this stuff all through the conversation today. So Andrew Shotland, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, appreciate it. And this guy, let me tell you, he's really modest. He knows his shit, but he's really modest about the way he approaches it. And I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you having you here. So listen, first question, it's kind of an open game, but define in your words SEO marketing.
Let's see. The way I like to talk about SEO is I think it's the most ridiculous marketing channel out there. Any of you who've dabbled in it or hired companies to do it for you or consultants, often the things we tell clients to do is like, close your eyes, stand on your tippy toes and twirl around 3 times and something will happen. That's what it sounds like. But at the same time, it's this crazily important channel for most businesses that have websites because it ends up being the bulk often of the ways you can get customers to your sites because Google has such a stranglehold on consumer traffic.
Which we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. So SEO, if you want to get really like the Wikipedia version, SEO is kind of like the art and science of showing up in search engine results for it at the top, hopefully, for the search queries that your prospective customers are making, hopefully when they're ready to buy your product and they're in the market. Or they're maybe not in the market yet, but they're going to get there. Right. So it's basically how do you create visibility for your brand, your site, in front of consumers, your customers, when they're getting ready to buy through search.
Absolutely. Great. Now, I gave a little bit of background about your story, but what has inspired, if you could give us the shorter version, but of you and your travels and getting into the space and having the company you have today, which is very successful. And I'd like you to unpack that a little bit.
So very long story short, Insider Pages was an early version of Yelp. We raised venture capital money from Sequoia Capital and SoftBank. We were going to be enormous. We used SEO. I kind of figured it out while I was there, and we used it to grow the site traffic tremendously. And we redesigned our website, and I didn't know what I didn't know, and we lost all our traffic. I got fired. We sold the company to City Search. And I totally accidentally started this SEO company because it was right place, right time. People were looking for SEO help. And I guess I had a decent network at the time. So totally accidental, fell into it, like didn't think. I kept telling my brother, he says, you kept telling me, yeah, I'm going to do this for a couple months or a year, and then I'm going to do something else. And that was like 18 years ago. So here I am.
Yeah, it always seems to happen that way, right? You're like, I'll dabble in this thing. And then all of a sudden, next thing is, this thing turns into an animal. So What are some, so if you're a small or medium-sized business just starting out, so I want to start again, a little more basic, and then we'll get a little more advanced as we get
Sure.
along here. But if
Sure.
you're a small to medium-sized business just starting out with SEO, what are some of the first steps that a business should be focusing on?
So I think the first thing so if we're let's stick with just a local business
Sure.
versus like any old business, like just
Of
because
course.
there's infinite different ways. But the first thing you want to do is make sure that you show up for searches for your brand, so people can find you who know you. And it's you'd think that's obvious how to do it, but a lot of times it's not.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure your website is set up so that a machine can say this is david.com, right? Um,
Right.
if you have an address, you want to set up what's called a Google Business Profile, which is like a yellow pages listing for your site on Google, that has your correct name, address, and phone number, and is categorized correctly, meaning you can pick. I am, as an example, are you an animal hospital or are you a veterinarian? Like
Right.
that kind of thing. And and you just kind of want to have a site that mentions the location that you're in. So I'm in Houston, and the services you offer. And like that's to start, that's the basic gist of it. It gets
Gotcha.
way more complicated, but you're busy starting your business. You shouldn't be worrying too much about SEO unless you're an SEO focused business. Get your website up and workable so that someone who's heard of you comes to it and can buy something from you or call you or whatever, and
Yeah.
just get the basics right.
Just the basics down. So those things that you touched on are pretty much the basics of, having a good site, something you can
Yeah.
navigate through, the address, location,
Yeah.
all that good
And
stuff.
and with a local business, make sure that your data is available on the places where your customers are. So as an example, if you think all your customers are looking at Yelp, just create a Yelp profile. I guarantee you, like, let's say you're an Android user, but
Right.
so you don't even know Apple Maps exists. I guarantee you, nearly half your customers are finding you on Apple Maps. So go into Apple Maps and create a profile. Um, Same thing for Bing. Bing's not huge, but it's big enough. Make sure you have a business listing on Bing, maybe Facebook, and then after that, figure out what are the sites that show up for the searches you want to query, you want to rank for, and make sure you have a listing on those sites. That's kind of the basics, I think.
That's basics. Okay. All right. So now let's move next level. Let's talk like e-commerce, companies that are gonna, be a little bit more robust
Mm-hmm.
in really driving traffic to their site. Okay. We've talked about some of the basics, but moving into that level, what do you feel are some of the more important things to be focusing on?
So I think you have a few different ways to approach SEO as, let's just say, an e-commerce site.
Okay.
The first one is technical SEO, which means, in my view, means like, can I make all of the pages on my website, all the URLs on my website, uh, accessible to a bot and accessible and understandable by a machine, meaning search engines.
Okay.
Uh,
Yes.
and so you want to make sure e-commerce sites can get very technically complex. You want to make sure that the SEO part of it is set up correctly. I'm not going to go into every little detail about
Yeah.
how to set up an e-commerce site, but basically I can find all your category pages. I can find all your shelf pages, meaning like subcategories. And then I can find all your product detail pages. So this is the Ninja Instapot thing. Um, at baseline, that's kind of what you have to have. And then they need to be accessible to a browser that doesn't support JavaScript. And
Okay.
JavaScript, for those of you who don't know, JavaScript's just some soft like programming that is hard for a search engine to get through and find your content. And so oftentimes you'll build a fancy website and you'll make it invisible to a search engine because you didn't make stuff available to browsers that don't support JavaScript. That's as technical as I'm going to get with you guys.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
uh, and then the things to think about, really, the non-technical things to think about: taxonomy, meaning how am I naming my categories? So as an example, we work with a bunch of big e-commerce sites, and they have these categories like coffee, tea, and cocoa as a one category, like an umbrella category.
Okay.
And the way you call your categories actually affects how they show up in search. No one searches for coffee, tea, and cocoa, right?
Right.
I search for coffee, right?
You got to break them down individually.
Right. And I search for ground coffee or French roast coffee or decaf or whatever. And so you have to have all those concepts in your taxonomy and make them available, in a simple way to a search engine. Last thing I'll talk about with e-commerce, with any site, links are part of the gas that make your site go. The stuff I talked about before is, think of it as like I'm souping up a car, and now the car needs gas, and links and content are the gas. And so links from other sites are important. And so you should have some kind of PR plan that's designed to get attention from other websites so they link to you. And that's often we see with sites, they don't really plan for that. And so they're kind of fighting with two hands tied behind their back, because their site's good, but they're not getting any attention from anybody.
Right. And, that's kind of one of the questions I had, would think it through my head going through this was, what role does content play in an effective SEO strategy, right? I mean, a business can really have some good content, but if they don't know how to push it down the right rank to optimize their content for better ranking, then they're going to struggle, right? I mean, talk a little bit about that.
So content means a lot of different things in SEO. So let's start with the obvious thing. So articles, how to do XYZ, right? That's kind of, I think, the classic content. So what helps in SEO is if you're seen by Google as, let's call it, an authority, meaning you have a lot of content about related topics that seem quote unquote good compared to other topics. And good is like, so many factors go into what equals good. Let's just for now say, oh, it's really good. That's a good, people like that article, right?
All right.
So that's one. So you may want to be, as an example, I just got off a call with a site that business that has apartment rental data, and they have data on like much better data than say apartments.com or Zillow. And they have a big site that's like apartments for rent in Houston, Texas, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, less than $1,000, something like that.
Great.
But their customers are not so much apartment renters as buyers of that data, like the Federal Reserve. And they have no content about like, what's the use case for the Federal Reserve? Like, what are they searching in Google before they decide these guys have that data? So these guys need content. Like, how do I determine, like, someone's using their data to track gender equity and inclusion data for apartment renters across the country. And so a query that they might have content for would be like, how do I find gender equity inclusion data for apartment data? And what do I do with it, right? How do I use it? And so they should be writing content about that as a use case. And now they can rank for that thing as someone's searching for it. So that's one part of content. Another part of content is what's called programmatic content. So how do I create scale stuff that is interesting to Google and to customers? And so as an example, having a user community, like let's say you have an e-commerce site and you're selling Ninja Pots. You want to have like reviews of your Ninja Pot on their pages. You want to have people asking questions. How can this handle like a 60-pound ham? That kind of thing. And then answer those questions. That's what Google will call helpful content. And so if you can figure out a way to do that at scale, you've got a really good shot at doing SEO well, because most sites can.
Interesting. Because the way you're breaking it down is really into two sections here. You've got your data content, right? And then you've got content that what did you call it? Programmatic?
Programmatic, yeah.
Programmatic, where you're actually pushing it out.
Right? And it just it just goes, there's a flywheel, right?
Push it, right, pushing out.
And
So that's
the
interesting.
flywheel is how most of the big sites rank
Yes.
well. So
Right.
a really good site to look at for SEO is
Uh-huh.
NerdWallet. You may probably
Yeah.
seen them in search. It's all like, hey, what's the best credit card? And what do I do? Where do I get the best mortgage and that kind of thing? And they spend a ton on content, meaning people writing articles about financial subjects. Like I bet they spend like $1 million a month or something on content. Like it's because they're making so much money off of it. It's worth it. And then they have just as many, if not more, programmatic pages that's like mortgage rates in California 2024 kind of thing that
Right.
has dynamic data on the best mortgage rates for that kind of stuff.
That's
We
great.
did
I
it.
mean,
We
go
did a thing for a crypto site. Can't remember CoinDesk, where we basically help them create pages for every like crypto coin with like Bitcoin prices and everything you need to know about Bitcoin and Ethereum prices and everything. And they just create that, and suddenly they start showing up for all those queries.
That's great. Listen, this is really, I don't want to get too technical in it, but for me, my wheels are turning on it because on the data side, it seems like it would be more driven for consumer, B2C, but can you do the B2B too? Is there a lane for that?
B's are just C's, right? Like
Yeah.
so, like it's no different. It's just different topics, right? And often B2B, in our experience, it's not always the case. B2B services have a much smaller set of uh, let's say topics to go after, but that doesn't mean it's not huge. It just
Right.
means
Right.
like Walmart has to target like red sneakers, blue sneakers, girl sneakers, men's sneakers, that kind of thing. Whereas, I don't know, pick your favorite B2B site. It's going to be how do I, we're working with with Kodak, if you can believe it. Kodak's always hilarious to
Really?
me. Yeah, it's still around, and they sell commercial like grade printing,
Okay. Makes sense.
printing like so if you need to do a very specific type of monster print job, they have the like $1 billion machine that can do that for you. And you can imagine the queries, there's a lot of queries, but they're very technical and very specific. Like,
And
how can I do this thing with this color? And I don't even know. I don't even remember what the queries are, but they're really like, I need to do 10 million flyers with at this like pixel rate, and like so that the number of those queries is very small, but
yeah,
very easy to target because it's much less competitive.
yeah, it's the right targets for sure. For sure. All right. I'm going to switch gears here. Let's talk about 10,000-pound gorilla, Google. Why is Google? People probably come to you and go, "Why is Google killing my business? They evolve all the time. They're always changing things up."
Yeah, it's funny. If you had said that to me maybe 2 years ago, I'd be like, they don't really change things up that much. Like, yeah, they do, but it's not. They don't change that much. Last 2 years, boy, they changed a lot. Like they threw everything up in the air. So yeah, Google is where 90% of searches happen, I'd say. Uh, uh, we look at, we have access to data on a ton of different websites, big and small. It's the same everywhere, right? Very few
Yeah.
people are like, "Ooh, Bing is everything to my company." It's not the case. Um, Even you've seen all these AI services like ChatGPT and Perplexity. A lot of people are using them, but we can see referrals from those services to sites. I'd say the biggest one we've seen is last week. Someone got 1,500 clicks from like ChatGPT, which
What?
which is, I don't know, that's not nothing, but this is a site that gets like 30 million visits a month. So who cares about 1,500 clicks, right? Um,
Right. Right.
uh, so Google, right, is where all the traffic is. Google
Yes.
has been squeezing site owners to make more money, meaning pushing the organic results, the free results, uh, down in favor of ads and other Google properties, and making it harder. They just launched these AI overviews over the last year, which is their version of ChatGPT. Uh, we've just seen the first evidence, or let's say suspected evidence, because it's very hard to track this stuff, that it's starting to affect rankings for content. Meaning, we're working with a chain of veterinarians. It's about 400 locations or something, and we aggregate all the traffic data from they have like a domain for every location, and we aggregate all that traffic data, and we can see that over the last 3 months, they're getting more impressions from Google.
Okay.
Their rankings for all these keywords that they rank for are going up. So impressions and rankings are going up. That's generally a good thing in SEO.
Right.
But clicks are going down. So going in the opposite direction. And that makes no sense, because if your rankings are going up as impressions are going up, you should be showing up higher and getting more clicks.
Right.
And so we did some very ad hoc research on it. And it seems like what's happening is it's all their blog content. It's all there. And what's happening is blog content is very, let's just call it general. So what are the signs of doggy dementia? It's actually a popular word. I didn't know that until we started working with these guys. And so you can imagine the AI thing can service that. So Google put what we think is happening. Google's putting AI overviews in front of a lot of blog stuff where blogs used to rank really well. So Google, Google's tough now. It's very tough.
So I guess, for a smaller business, that you're going to really have to how do you guys stay on top of it though? I guess that's the biggest thing.
We pretend like we do. No, right.
Actually hang on to the dragon by the tail, so to speak.
Well, there's something actually to that. I'm being facetious, but look, we can't keep track of everything. Yeah. But we're as an industry, let's say, we're as ahead of the curve as you can be, kind of. And so we tend to have good frameworks for how to kind of figure what's the next thing out? How do we get around this thing or take advantage of this thing? I like to say we're like plumbers that way, but with very strange toilets. Like, I've never seen this toilet before. Like, what is this, like Japanese or something? Like, I don't know. Like, and then we can, but we've unclogged a million toilets. So we're like, okay, I think I need to like bend the plunger this way to get it in this thing. And I think that's what we tend to be good at, hopefully. Or at least I like to think we're good at that. As an example, right now, we just licensed a whole bunch of data from a company that is scraping AI overviews from all the big AI engines. And we're now putting that all into like a dashboard and trying to figure out like, okay, so for McDonald's, what is the AI experience, and how are they appearing? And then what do we think we can do to affect how they appear?
So what you just said is that you're taking AI on top of AI. Use AI overviews on top of AI.
So I not really. What I said is like, okay, so there are 4 or 5 major AI experiences right now. There's Google Gemini, which is their AI overviews. There's ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Claude, and a couple others.
Okay.
Facebook. And so what this company's doing is doing queries into those things and scraping the results.
Gotcha.
And then databasing them and say, oh, well, when you search for hamburger, McDonald's shows up number 1. And when you search for like, what's the best hamburger, they show up number 4, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
And so we're now looking at that data for our clients and trying, 1, just reporting on it. And then 2, trying to go, okay, what does this mean? Like, is this good? Is this bad? What do we think we can do to affect it? We don't know yet. We're still screwing around with that. But so I just bring that up as an example of, like people in our industry are all trying to figure this out. And I don't think I think we're it. We're like I like to say we'll never, SEOs will be the first ones to know if Skynet becomes sentient, because we're the ones looking at this thing every day and poking it.
Right, you're on top of it.
Holy shit! I think the AI is about to kill us. Like,
It may. Listen, I know we've talked about this evolution, right, of SEO. Google obviously being the bigger piece of this. But over the past few years, what has evolved, and what trends should businesses be paying attention to now?
Now, well, one of the things that we're kind of hot on is over the last several years has been the increasing localization of search results.
Okay.
So, like maybe 5 years ago, if you searched for mattresses, you would get like mattress.com and Purple and Casper and all those guys. And then uh, over time, you started seeing Google Maps results for mattresses near you, and then local businesses, the local mattress store showing up in the results. And so,
Nice.
most
That's
e-commerce queries have been localized now. Um, uh,
great.
yeah, it's really, there's this big advantage to local businesses that we think is that's one of the reasons why we spend a lot of time in local is accident of history, but also like, oh, there's a lot of business here, and a lot of opportunity. So I think if you're a brand that has a local presence, you should be trying to figure out how you can take advantage of that. We see a lot of small brands and big brands that don't really like when you're like brand like McDonald's. I'm not saying McDonald's is the one, but like
Right.
the locations generally get no love or respect from a marketing point of view. They don't get any mind share. It's always about the brand. And so, but there are all sorts of things you can do on your website to location pages to help them show up better. And so you should be doing that. Uh, from a non-local point of view, actually I'm going to stick with local again because
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time in it this week. Uh, One of the things you should be doing right now, so I'm guessing some people listening to this have made some significant investments in SEO and are getting jack out of it. Um, this is
Mm.
a this is a thing we figured out with this chain we were just working with. We were actually auditing their agency because they were spending a lot of money, like millions of dollars, on an SEO program, and they're like, we don't know that we're getting anything, but we don't know how to evaluate that.
Okay.
So they hired us to come in and audit the agency, which we love doing. It's fun to see how other people do stuff. Um, and what we could see was they were publishing blog content, kind of resource content, like what is doggy dementia, and that kind of thing, on hundreds of websites, and they were making it a little different each time, that kind of thing. And they were actually getting a lot of traffic to these sites from that content because people were searching for what is doggy dementia. Great. Except that content is what we call national content. I call it national content, meaning there's nothing inherently local about it. So you might have a location in Houston, Texas, that ranks number one in Google for what is doggy dementia, and 99.9% of the traffic is going to come from outside of Texas, meaning they're never going to hire you. So someone from Alaska with a screwy dog is not going to hire you, right? And so all that content is mostly a waste. Mostly, there's some. If you think that's what your customers like, and when they come to your website, they want to read it, great. But I guarantee you, 99% of the time, when someone ranks on it, when clicks on it, they're not going to hire you because they can't. They're not in your market. And
Market.
so local businesses today should be looking at their content investment and going, how local is it, right? So we work with a franchise company that uh, basically is for non-medical home care. So your father has Alzheimer's, you need someone to take care of them during the day while you work. They come over and make lunch for him or something. Uh, uh, so they had the same thing. Like, how do I know if my dad has Alzheimer's type content? Which the Mayo Clinic is going to rank for that, not you. And
Right.
what they really needed was, hey, what are the memory care facilities in Tallahassee, Florida, right? Because that's what someone who lives in Tallahassee and has an Alzheimer's thing might be searching for, right? Or if you're a veterinarian, what are the dog parks in Tallahassee, right? Like, oh, I own a dog. And I didn't know that veterinarian exists. And they told me where the dog parks are, or pet friendly restaurants, or pet friendly hotels, like that kind of stuff.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier about the data, right? I mean, you got to have the right data or the right targets, so to speak, and data is targets in some cases, but you can't just be blasting it out to,
you can. It's just
Mexico. I
like
mean, you're right, you can,
you're
but
not gonna. You may not
New
get much
Mexico if you don't
return.
have a location in New Mexico.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
getting harder. Like Google's just getting. Also, what's happening, right, is a lot of businesses are using AI to crank out like a crazy amount of content, and Google has like really turned the screws on those things because they're getting flooded. It costs Google to crawl, meaning like a bot goes and finds
yeah,
your URL, and index, meaning it warehouses the data from your site. It costs them every URL, right? I don't know how much, but you can imagine if you're trying to do that for every website on the planet, how many trillions of pages? And now
yeah.
any idiot can push a button and suddenly have 100,000 pages of content on their site. Whether it's good or not, who knows? But it's costing. I bet if we had a peek inside of Google's financials, they like a year ago they were like, we're spending way too much money on crawling
Yeah,
our data.
right, right. Um, that is it's great feedback. Great feedback. Great answer to that question. So
Woo.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. And listen, we're unpacking a lot here, man. I know it started off base, but we're jamming. I mean, this is great stuff. How does your team at Local SEO Guide approach building an SEO strategy for, let's just say you talked about a location for 400 businesses versus a location that might only have two? Like, is the strategy kind of the same, or do you? There's fundamentals, and obviously every business is a little bit different. You're going to take different strategies, but talk to me about how you approach that.
So every website essentially has the same 10 issues and um, uh, and each genre of website is slightly different things. So like a local website has a slightly different things that you have to worry about than say an e-commerce site, or yeah. And so we have a kind of playbook for each type of site. So I know in general what we need to do for a multi-location brand. And then I know what we have to do for a multi-location brand that also does e-commerce. And I know what we have to do for an e-commerce site. So we start with these kind of basic building blocks of an SEO program. And they're kind of what I've already talked through. There's a billion more pieces of detail, right? But in general, technically make your site visible to a bot, and then think about how your customers search, and figure out how you can create content that answers the questions that people search for. So you have to basically have ways for figuring out how your customers search. Best way, by the way, is talk to your salespeople and say, what are the
Mhm.
top 100 questions that customers always ask us? And
Great
that's your
tip.
SEO. That's your
There you
SEO
go.
strategy right there. If you do
Clip that.
nothing but publish those on your site, you're way ahead of 99% of everyone else. Um,
That's great. Listen, clip that back because that right there was fantastic. I think you just hit it on the head. There's this disconnect between, and I call it marketing because SEO is involved in that, but marketing and sales, right? There's no communication, and I think that was a huge point. So great nugget.
You'd be amazed how hard it is when, especially like in B2B. So B2B SaaS companies actually are the best SEO clients because the strategy is really straightforward. It's kind of what I just articulated.
Yeah.
And it's just like, can you create best of breed content that answers these questions? But when we kick off, we're like, hey, can we get a salesperson on the call so can we interview like 5 salespeople?
So good.
No, everyone's like, oh, they're busy. They don't want to do it. It's not that they're not in our department. I'm like, so like, get your salespeople involved, right?
If it's going to generate sales for them, they tell them it's going to help them sell more. They'll be in
yeah,
on it. Believe me. Coming
yeah,
from a
yeah,
sales professional myself.
yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What tools and metrics do you recommend businesses use to measure the success of their efforts in this space?
Uh, so everyone has different what we'll call KPIs, key performance indicators that they
Yes.
are concerned with. Often it's usually it ends up being revenue, right? But some people are like, oh no, I want booked demos, or I want phone calls or something like. So you have to kind of start with like, what do I want? And then, but at a basic level, we build our own dashboards for clients and ourselves. So there's a couple of different tools that you can use that have the data. You don't have to build your own. So Google Search Console is the Google's dashboard they give you that kind of gives you some data about how your website is performing in Google. There's a lot of technical stuff in there that you won't get, but there's a search performance report that shows you, hey, here are the pages you rank for and that rank in Google, and here are the keywords they rank for. And here's how many clicks you got yesterday. I think that's a good place to start.
Great.
Google Analytics is kind of complicated sometimes, but you should set up a report that shows you basically there's this section in Google Analytics called Explore, and you can create a custom report that tracks organic sessions. That's how I like to track it, but you can just go into the traffic acquisition report that's already pre-built in Google Analytics, and you can click on organic and you can see, is it going up or down? And then in Google Business, I don't know what they even call it, but your Google Business profile, if you log into that, it has a performance section that shows you how many calls you're getting, how many clicks you're getting, how many impressions, and all those things add up to kind of decent metrics for how you're doing. One thing you should do figure out how to do is in Google Search Console, when you're looking at this search performance report, which shows your clicks and impressions for keywords, there's a way to filter it by like, don't look at these keywords. Don't show me data for these keywords. You need to understand what your brand keywords are, meaning your business name or some product name, and then scrub those out of the data. And the reason why you do that is you're almost always going to rank for your brand queries. Like you get that for free sometimes, unless you have a really generic brand. And so your SEO program, usually 90% of the time, is focused on non-brand queries. And I want to see how that's doing. There's other good reasons to track your brand queries for SEO, but just to see how your SEO is doing, I'd be like, what's my non-brand query? So do it like query. There's a little filter. Say query does not contain my brand name. And that's where I'd start. Of course, you want to have conversion metrics set up. There's all sorts of basic analytic stuff you should be doing. If you're not already tracking like conversions and things like that, get that right first, and then worry about tracking SEO stuff.
Kind of get the basics down, and figure
have someone who knows Google Analytics. Make sure they've set it up so you'd be surprised. You wouldn't be surprised. I'd say 90% of the clients when we start with them, like, do you believe the data in Google Analytics? No, some guy set that up like 3 years ago and we haven't touched it. I don't even know. And I'm like, yeah, I don't buy it.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. So, well, listen, one more question before we go here. Where do you see the future of SEO headed right now? We talked about this earlier about the advancements of AI and voice search and all this stuff. I mean, where do you see this all going?
I just think so. I think of SEO as kind of like gaming the system, right? So, so there, and the system is any system. So where is SEO going? Well, you may have noticed that Reddit, the site Reddit, shows up in search results a lot over the last year because Google has promoted it. The fastest growing website on the planet because Google put it at the front of search results. So now part of SEO is figuring out how do I show up high on Reddit, right? For queries. So I think what's happening is it's getting fragmented. It's not just Google. It's now, how do I show up on Reddit? How do I show up on TikTok, right? How do I show up on Facebook or whatever it is? And so wherever your customers are, like that's where it's going. As far as things like voice search, everyone freaked out when things started to be about voice search until they realized, oh, it's just search results. It's just
Right.
there's no
Throwing crap
strategy to
there.
rank in voice search. It's just SEO. I think the AI stuff is the real big question mark we have,
Yeah.
because as we saw with that blog example I told you, it seems to be eating away at what we'll call top of funnel traffic, meaning general stuff that someone searches before they're ready to buy. I think where that's going is they're going to start to, when you call a helpline and they're like, press 1 if you want this or that or
Yes.
whatever, and it takes you down a path. I think that's what AI is going to evolve into, and search is going to evolve into. So it's my daughter's birthday. She loves green. Hey, what's a cute green dress for a teenager? Oh, this one. Do you like this brand or that brand? This polka dots or stripes? Boom, 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 boom. And then, oh, is it in inventory in your store down by? Or you want to do it on Amazon? Or that's what it's going to do. And so our job as SEOs is to figure out what that path is for a buyer, and then how do we game the system to make it so that your stuff shows up there instead of someone else's. And I think the consistent strategy that you can do, or that you're going to have to adhere to, is technical, like know-how. Can a bot understand the stuff and find it? And then, is my content helpful? When someone sees it, do they click on it? Do they come back to it? Do they share it? Is it good? And that's just data driven. Oh yeah, when 90% of people who click on this page leave it in 10 seconds because it sucks. Okay, right. You need to fix that, shit. Right?
Yep. No pun intended for the veterinarian. But listen, I told you, everybody, this guy knows his stuff. And if you came away from this going, whew, there's some stuff to do here, call him. Make it easy on yourself, okay? But I learned some great stuff actually from this, just conceptually talking through the conversation with you. And if you're a business out there, whether small, medium, or large, you've got to stay in front of this stuff if you want to grow. And this guy, I told you, is the expert from the beginning. And even coming away from this, it just reaffirms for me, he just knows his shit, and you're going to want to reach out. So Andrew, if someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they find you? Where do they go?
So you can go to localseoguide.com, and there's a contact form on there. Always like to get contacts. You can find me on Twitter at Local SEO Guide, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just say, hey, I saw you on Sales Proformance, and let's talk.
Great.
Or on Threads. I'm everywhere. David, I just gave you a link in the chat for a thing that we're launching in a couple of weeks called SERP Summary. In SEO, there's this thing called a weather report, which basically you track a bunch of keywords and you see how the rankings change and how volatile it is. And people are like, hey, it's stormy today. Like Google's doing something. Nice. Generally, these weather reports are useless. They're just marketing. So we're creating one that's useful, we think, in the home services industry to start. So we'll be able to say, hey, if you're a pest control company, here's how the search results changed over the last week. And so I just give you that URL. It's called localseoguide.com/SERP-summary. If you go there, you can sign up. And when it's launched, hopefully when it's launched, I'll send you an email and say, hey, it's launched. Come check it out. And then I'll spam
do
you.
that. Do that. Shoot me an email, because we'll put that up for sure. And Maria, you can put that up here on the link just to share it, at least give everybody a point of context and a reference point. But yeah, that's fantastic. Listen, man, I have thoroughly enjoyed our talk today. I knew we were going to, what was great about it? I mean, we did get into some technical stuff, but we really kept it very understandable for people, even for myself. And I have I have some background on an SEO. But the way you translated things and answered it was fantastic. So thanks for being on the show. He is Andrew Shotland. Check him out. And I am Dave Sliman, your host of the Sales Proformance Podcast show. Like this show, share the show, put it in front of somebody for us. We appreciate you being here. Wealth, health, and success to all of you, and we'll see you at the next one.
Proformance Show.